thank you very much, and thanks to Jay and the team here for inviting us back to speak. Feels like we haven't been in Vancouver for quite a while now, so it is great to be back. For us, dealing with batteries and EVs and everything to do with the supply chain, everything begins in places like Vancouver. Everything begins with exploration and development. And we'll show for this presentation how that is becoming more and more of a core focus for the entire world, not just the industry, but also governments around the world. So this is how we view I like starting with this. This is how, very simply, we view the battery supply chain, the electric vehicle supply chain. But the key thing here is, of course, it all begins with mining, and that's really where the geopolitical focus is now shifting to. You've had this global battery arms race that's really kind of gripped the world the last 5 years, but all these gigafactories around the world are being built without even thinking about building the mine capacity alongside it. That's now coming back to bite the industry quite hard. So I'll start with the basics of how we view the lithium-ion battery as a technology, which kind of drives this whole thing. But for us, the advantages of the lithium-ion battery are increasing. Lithium-ion batteries are getting better. They're getting lower cost, even though the costs of batteries have kind of increased a little bit the last 2 years. The long-term trend is battery cost is coming down, and they are abundant. If I was standing on this stage back in 2015, there would have been 3 gigafactories in the pipeline, the Tesla gigafactory in Nevada being the biggest. Now we're tracking over 350 of these gigafactories that are being built, of which 145 are now active, supersized battery plants making battery cells for EVs, for energy storage as well, but predominantly electric vehicles. So even higher level, obviously this term, the energy transition, is going to be discussed here for certain raw materials, certain elements that are core to this energy transition. But what kind of do we mean? For me, the energy transition is obviously a selection of really kind of emerging low carbon, non-fossil fuel based industries. Electric vehicles is the biggest cog of that for us. Initially, wind, solar are in that, hydrogen and nuclear. But for me, the whole point about lithium-ion batteries, why this is the center point of this entire energy transition, is it's got the most arrows going into it in terms of raw material inputs, in terms of the opportunity here for investors and new mines to be built, certainly here in Canada as well, especially here in Canada. Most arrows going into it and the most arrows coming out of it. Batteries are core to electric vehicles. It's the same batteries that are going to be key to scaling solar, making that more viable, and the same for wind. So that's why the lithium-ion battery is, for me, the number one technology of this energy transition, and it's just coming of age. Where do we stand today with lithium-ion batteries? Where are we going tomorrow? So, I mean, this is going to go out, by the way, so you can download this and look at it in your own time. But right now, we're right in the middle of this chart. You might see it at 2022, start of 23. But last year, the amount of batteries, the amount of supply, the amount of batteries that got out into the wild increased by about 40%. So, like, the lithium-ion battery industry effectively grew a new industry in 12 months. Not out of the blue, it's been planned, but it's kind of an industry on top of an industry. So you're going from this small startup phase into a scale-up phase. If you rewound back in 2015 when we founded Benchmark as an independent publishing and data company to track this, it was 60 gigawatt hours. Now we stand at about 750 gigawatt hours. 1,000 gigawatt hours is about 15 million EVs, just for reference. But look where we're going after that. We're going from 0.7 gigawatt hours to terawatt hours a day through to 3 terawatt hours, or 750 to 3,000, 750 to 5,000, depending on trajectories. The point is, it's not quite an order of magnitude anymore, but it's significant scale, and a lot of mining will need to take place for this. So this is kind of one of the trends that are really underpinning the whole thematic at the moment. This is a story we wrote back in April last year. The fact that if governments and industry talk about electric vehicles and batteries now, well, then they must talk about mining in the same context. EVs are effectively mining, and I'll explain what I mean. Back in 2015, these two pie charts show the cost, the really basic costs of making a lithium-ion battery. In this pre-gigafactory era, let's try and say that quickly, 40% of your cost was raw materials, minerals, metals, chemicals. Today, it's about 70 to 80% of the cost of making a battery are minerals, metals, and chemicals. So these lithium-ion battery pictures you see are a jelly roll of elements, and it all begins in places like Vancouver. Then even more startling, I think, is this graphic. So the Tesla Gigafactory was the first concept to build effectively the world's total of batteries back then under one roof, and actually make enough battery cells to make enough EVs. That's the logic. Everyone kind of gets that. But last week, I think, Tesla announced a massive expansion of the Gigafactory 1 in Nevada from about 40 gigawatt hours to now 140. So they're adding 100 gigawatt hours on this site. What does that mean for the raw materials? Well, you can see the numbers are ridiculous, right? Like graphite anode, 140,000 tons a year. Now, what does that mean for a flake graphite mine? You times that by about 2. So that's like 300,000 tons of flake graphite that you'll need just to make that every year. Lithium, 100,000 tons of lithium chemical, LCE. What's the average mine size today? Maybe 25,000 tons. So these things are sucking up, mine by mine, all of this raw material. And the planning of the mining industry know this, but the finance and government and really end users like big auto companies are only just starting to get it. And they should have got it 10 years ago, but that's not for me to criticize. So getting into the trends of what's happening a little bit more. The first thing is shrinking the distance traveled between the critical minerals mine and the end market. Right now, you could be traveling, take lithium out of the ground, it could be going 10, 15,000 miles to go through all that supply chain and end up in an electric vehicle. You have to localizing supply chains more, building mines in Canada, building a supply chain in conjunction with the US, shrinking that supply chain, say under 10,000 miles, maybe 5,000 miles, is kind of the concept. And the three things driving that are, of course, resource, supply chain security. We've all seen what's happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine and and the energy crisis that's kind of propagated around the world, certainly in the West. That's number one. Number two, supply chain control and quality. The raw material you pull out the ground will have a direct effect on the electric vehicle that you're driving. So, again, if you're big automotive companies, you're just clocking on to this concept that the raw material will directly affect the quality of the EV that you're putting out to the market. So that's number two, having complete supply chain control and vision. Number three is building these 21st century industries. As I mentioned, lithium-ion batteries is going to be one of the industrial engines of the rest of this century. It will outlast probably all of us in this room. It'll be different flavors, there'll be different types of battery technologies that come in, but the core of what lithium-ion is will remain and will just grow stronger. Even though we're 27 years in of this kind of technology, it's evolving so quickly within its own sphere. This is just underlining that concept of 10, 15,000 miles, shrinking it to under 5,000 miles. That presents opportunities for everybody in this room, opportunities for Canada as a country, and certainly opportunities for someone like the United States, which is powered by the Inflation Reduction Act, to actually build localized supply chains for brand new industries. A bit on China, because China initially was driving all of this. China's control of this battery supply chain through forward thinking, forward investment 10 plus years ago, Of course, it's put it into a leadership position in this electric vehicle and battery story. The red lines on this are China's capacity at each stage of this battery supply chain. And what kind of you can see, you can dig into this later, is that China, the more downstream you go, the more to the right of this chart, there's more red. And the upstream you go to mining, there's less red. There's a little bit, certainly for graphite. There's a lot of graphite mining in China, dominates that. But everything else, China's not a big mining country for our industry, but it does control the midstream and the downstream, and that's really where the rest of the world lacks and is playing catch up. So we put this chart out. You might have seen it, you might have not. You can Google this and it will pop up everywhere. But we actually tried to map, all right, fast forward around about 10 years, where do we stand with how many batteries we'll need at present projections. And we're relatively conservative with our projections compared to other outfits. So we were saying, in and around, demand-wise, we're in and around 5,000 gigawatt hours in the mid-2030s from 750 today. So it's a 5x, it's a 7x, not a 10x. How many mines will that need? It's ridiculous. I mean, okay, mines will get bigger, so this is a sketch. It's not exactly, but it's ridiculous, right? Like 59 new lithium mines, 62 new cobalt mines, 72 new nickel mines, 97 natural flake graphite mines, and 52 synthetic graphite plants. Those numbers won't come to fruition. Mines will get bigger, projects will get bigger as well. From this level, they will have to scale quicker, but it just shows you that we are going into a new era where mining is at the center of driving this industry forward. So, final few slides. Again, hopefully it puts into context what I've been talking about. So that's kind of where we're heading. Number one, I kind of explain that, 3 steps. The growth is continuing. No other technologies are coming to displace lithium-ion, and we are getting better at making them, and they're becoming cheaper. Number 2, demand is outpacing supply by about 3 to 5x, depending on where you look. Albemarle, one of the world's lithium biggest producers, very interesting actually, put out a demand number for lithium in 2030. Our demand number was about 2.4 million tons of lithium, which is a huge increase. We think supply will only meet about 2.1 million tons. Albemarle, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, it's powered all these new, let's say, plans, especially in the US. They're at 3.7 million tons now. So this kind of theoretical thing called demand is getting further into the distance, and supply is still can't respond quick enough. Therefore, financing needs to get serious about mining. If you look at it from a really big picture, the energy transition, let's say all in, depending on what estimates you use, around $100 trillion 50 years from now. This is the total tab of all those different technologies. Batteries actually only needs about 3 to 5 trillion of that. Sounds ridiculous, but a bit more context, and I'll explain why. If you look at where does that 3 or let's say $5 trillion go into batteries, actually most of it is in the supply chain, not battery cells. Where are we today? Well, battery cells over the last sort of 7 years has raised $350 billion. So that's already been planned for, it's in the pipeline, building these gigafactories. But the mining side, and we're working on a bang-on accurate number, but I'll give you my thinking, has only really raised, mining and refining has only really raised under 100 billion of that. It needs to raise 3x what batteries are raising to actually keep pace and make this industry work. So if you're financing these things, you no longer think in the hundreds of millions, but you have to think in the billions today, and then in 10 years' time, you're going to have to think in the trillions. So it's an interesting shift of thinking that's needed. And then I think this is the final slide. Yep, permitting. in order to do this, it takes, on average, 10 years, over 10 years, to build a critical mineral mine and chemical plant from scratch and to scale it. It takes less than 2 years to build a gigafactory and start making batteries. We call that this great raw material disconnect. That has to change. Permitting timelines for mines and chemical plants in North America need to be slashed. It needs to be at least halved or better. Governments can't claim they're serious about net zero and electric vehicles if they're not completely reforming permitting, certainly for critical mineral mines, to actually make this happen. The mining industry has been neglected for the best part of a generation. This battery industry is suffering because of that. It's not too late, but the next sort of 3 years will be defining. The upside for everybody investing in mining and everyone here is this is going to be a good 3 years if you're in this space. So hopefully that was a useful roundup of batteries, EVs, and benchmarkminerals.com. You get everything from there. Thank you for your time.